Ladies and gentlemen, in just a moment you are going to hear the voice of a man who will tell you some tremendously important facts.
Welcome to the Reality Revolution. Today I have the man, the myth, the legend. Aaron Abke is back for the third time on the Reality Revolution. We're going to go even deeper. We're going to talk about the law of one. We're going to talk about the mind. Who knows what we're going to talk about? But Aaron is my guru. He's who I go to for spiritual enlightenment. I have been helped so many times. Aaron has helped me through his videos and his trainings. But I tell you what, I actually got a chance to talk to Aaron a few times off camera, and he's one of the nicest dudes. And so it's been too long, and I'm so excited to have him back. Thank you for coming on the Reality Revolution. Welcome, Aaron.
Brian, my friend, I love coming on here, hanging out with you. It's definitely been too long, but you know, the time is now, right?
Time is now. So I do recommend, there's a lot of questions. If people are big fans of Aaron, I'm sure I've asked these questions before. So I suggest you go back and check our last two interviews. We've talked about a lot of different stuff, but Aaron and I share a passion for the law of one and the mind and pretty much everything. So as I've learned and more about the law of one, wanted to bring Aaron back and go deeper on this. The first thing I wanted to talk to you about, what before we go into it, from the time I've spoken to you, it's been a while. And the amazing thing about this, the law of one, is that you continually are learning little bits and pieces and expanding your understanding. You think at some point you understand it, but you don't. It seems to reveal itself like an onion, layer by layer. So I wanted to know where you're at with it, if you've had new revelations or changes in your understanding of this material.
Man, that's such a great question because the answer is a resounding yes.
Yeah.
I say this all the time, but the law of one is such a incredibly deep text that every single time I read it or really listen to it, and I'm now in the middle of my 7th time through it, every single time it's like I've never listened to it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not kidding. It goes that deep, and it's like you build these foundational understandings of what Ra talks about. And then the next time you pass through it, you see the next layer of truth underneath that, and you connect more things, and you're like, oh, I didn't even realize they were saying this, and it works like that. And the dots just continue to connect like some huge, database of information that Ra's delivered us. Mm-hmm. And it just takes us, third density chemical vehicles so much time to kind of sift through it and connect it all. But it's like, man, we've been given such a treasure through this text. I'm so passionate about it.
Just got a chance to read. It's really unfortunate. You read about Don Elkins and his contribution to this. It really, it came from him and his passion to try to understand extraterrestrials. And I just got a chance to read. There's on the web, on the LL Research, there's the Law of One, Personal Evolution. He wrote sort of like the first 2 chapters of a book while he was working on it. And he explained the Law of One. I got a way better understanding of it. Have you gotten a chance to read any of the Elkins stuff? He wrote a book called Extraterrestrial Communications and contributed some other writings, but I wanted to get your feeling about Elkins and his contributions outside of the Law of One material.
No, I didn't even know that there was such a thing.
Yeah,
that sounds incredible.
Go on LL Research, look up Don Elkins, and they're not complete. Like, I guess he was famous for writing like the beginning chapters of an idea and not, but then during the thick of it, he really attempted with about 30 pages to talk about the law of one in perspective of the Fermi paradox and even a little bit of the tarot stuff and how, and so I just came away just vastly impressed by Don Elkins.
He was incredible.
And so for people that don't know, the law of one was attempted and worked on by 3 people. Carla Ruckert was the one that was channeling, and Jim McCarty was the scribe, and Don Elkins is asking the questions. Really, a lot of what we're getting with this material is the amazing questions that Don Elkins is asking. And this is just like an airline pilot, right? So so the question is, first of all, there is a scientific at this point, and there's sort of a scientific bias against telepathic communication that has to be overcome. The scientific community absolutely just denies that's possible. And I think
Right.
that he established, as well as some other authors. And so I wanted to get your perspective on it. The idea that telepathic communication cannot be trusted, and it's, sort of ridiculous. What's your feeling on using telepathic communication as a means of information and understanding it?
I feel it's just like anything else in science. Like it's myth, it's fable, it's esoteric until it's not, until somebody can prove it, right? And then like, oh yes, yes, now it's scientific.
Right.
So I think we've seen in this last year more than ever that even science has dogma and arrogance in it. Um, everything can be fundamentalist, right? Even science.
Right.
And that's to be expected. That's the human nature of the ego. But at some point, they're going to come around to it sooner or later. And I don't know how long it will take for humans to evolve as we move into fourth density, to evolve the capacity for telepathic communication. But I think the only way science will acknowledge it, obviously, is through a controlled experiment that can be proven and replicated. Two people sharing thoughts
Right.
in two different rooms or something and writing things down. Then and only then will science take it seriously. But we can look to quantum physics, right, to understand how particles are entangled with one another, constantly sharing information and really changing through dimensions to travel through space and time instantaneously. And it's like, and telepathy is hard to believe. Like,
Right.
to me, quantum physics is already the weirdest thing going on.
Well, we spent billions of dollars on SETI trying to search out radio signals,
Right.
when it's kind of like we're from Elkins' perspective, such a minor technological advancement, the use of radio and this sort of messaging service, that as we start to uncover the law of one, really, most of these advanced societies, radio is just so insignificant and unimportant. We probably wouldn't be hearing radio signals if we can instantaneously telepathically communicate. There would be no need for us to
Right.
use radio or telephones. And so we're searching for something that's probably not there and doesn't necessarily disprove other intelligent races, right?
Yeah. What I can really see happening is, we're already getting pretty close to ET contact. I mean, we're seeing UFOs revealing themselves in such incredibly profound ways, which to me says that, I believe, according to the raw material, that ETs are monitoring our collective consciousness and awareness of their presence to know just how much contact they can establish with us. And we know that they're not afraid to establish telepathic communication through channeling, because they've already done that a number of times. So I think we'll see more and more materials like the Law of One, and perhaps even more profound, maybe even in terms of the scientific information being given. I can see extraterrestrials making first contact through channeling and telepathy alone to entities on our planet, people like Carla who have this ability, and speaking to our collective that way for quite a while before they actually come openly amongst us in a physical sense. And I think if that happens and they're delivering us scientific knowledge and understanding the theories of gravity or whatever, science will have to start going, okay, I mean, I'm sure that they will disregard the channeling aspect and say, okay, how did these people stumble upon this scientific information? Let's try to figure this out. And in that process, more and more minds will become open to the phenomenon of channeling and telepathy. And I think as everything becomes more accepted, as we accept the presence of ETs on our planet more and more, we have the June 1st disclosure coming up, which is a really great step towards collective awareness of ETs. I think that they will be more and more willing to take another step closer to us, right? Because their main thing is they don't want to infringe on our free will. So in a very real sense, it's totally up to us how fast this process goes, but it's up to us collectively, not individually. Otherwise, they'd be here today, right?
Right. So, as I am like you going through and rereading the Law of One, the thing that's been sticking out with me, I can't stop thinking about, is the passage. I know you know what I'm talking about, where they ask, what densities can go to war? And they say, well, fifth density, sixth density, it can't really go to. The only ones that can go to war are fourth density. And they sort of have a small number that agree to go to war, because it's, in the higher densities, obviously war is kind of not something that you do. So there's some fourth density planetary societies that agree, okay, we'll go to war against the fourth density negative, and it's a thought war. And so across the galaxy, we have these fourth density thought wars happening. And so this blows my mind. And I know you've thought about this. So we might have been caught up in the middle of it. What is your concept? If I was to write a movie about a thought war happening on Earth, what do you envision this thought war as?
Yeah, no, I've thought a lot about this. I want to say that there's a part, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, isn't there a part in the passage where Ross says something along the lines of they can create like sort of objects of warfare to launch at one another through thought alone?
Right.
Isn't that right? Or do
It's
they
like a
describe
thought
it at all?
form war. And obviously, we get the impression that the negative is always going to work in the background, because if they're going to confront you directly, they can lose their polarity, and it's like major danger. So they're always using what they term as the Men in Black, or actual robots. So like the question about, you know, what do you, if we stuck a Men in Black in the closet, would he disappear? And there's this idea that, you know, they may be using like what looks like human beings, but robots, and then thought forms as a sort of war. So there's two sides to this, right? So I'm still trying to put my, and obviously you're not going to have the answer, but you've touched on this in your consciousness and try to envision it, right?
Yeah, what I find really amazing about that passage is how Rod describes that only fourth density will engage in such battles,
right?
Because fifth density wisdom sees the futility of it on both positive and negative, as I would imagine sixth density does. But fourth density, not yet having the wisdom to see the futility of it, believes they can be of service in some way. And so the war or the battle Ra describes basically looks like the negative entities, Orion entities, launching these thought weapons, whatever that looks like, at the fourth density positive, and them just creating a shield barrier of love and light to block the attack. So they're basically just defending themselves, but still like showing up to the battle,
right?
But just to send love and light. And Ross says that both of them eventually are depleted energetically and decide to retreat or whatever. And then Dawn asks Ross something like, if the positive entities are here to be of service to others and the negative entities want to enslave them and whatnot, why wouldn't they be of service to the negative entities by letting them be enslaved? And Ross says, because love sees all things as equal, the service to others entities would not find it an act of service to make themselves inferior by putting themselves under the heel, so to speak, of the negative entities and being part of their enslavement, because that would make a superior inferior relationship, which isn't loving. So that's why they don't allow that kind of, they don't see that as service in that sense, but they do show up to be love and light, and in whatever way that they believe that might be of aid to the negative entities. I just find that super fascinating. But Rod does say that the social memory complexes that engage in these battles have, I mean, think about what one single ET is capable of doing, you know, levitating, creating objects through their mind, through thought. They say, think of the considerable abilities of a planetary civilization of minds coming together as one, and the power of creation that they would have. So I can only imagine, I mean, these would be like real physical objects of energy or something manifested being lobbed at one another. It's pretty
like a
sci-fi,
Harry Potter
crazy
type of
stuff.
magic war happening. You get a feeling it's something like that, right?
Like a Star Wars Harry Potter hybrid.
But I get it. This vision when they're using these robots, like, you know, that person over there is getting close to finding love. We need to distract him, or we'll send a girl robot along the way to distract him from being in this relationship, or to mess up this group, or, you know, to deceive him. It's always like very manipulative, underhanded. You can't quite tell what's going on. You get that feeling, right? That's what's going on. And they're good at it. They've been doing it all over the galaxy, right?
They're very good at it. I mean, that's the way of the negative path, is to be cunning and deceptive and make influences that are almost undetectable, but trickle downstream to create bigger issues that cause depolarization. I mean, the negative entity, because it denies the reality of love, has to rely even more so on wisdom and intellect to do its work. And there's a couple of places in the Law of One, right, where Ra talks about how sometimes fourth density or maybe even third density positive beings who are, Ra says, sort of gullible in the ways of love, because they're just, we're all one. I love you. You know,
Right.
you're one with me. And the negative entities know that about them, and they use that to their advantage. So it's
Yeah.
pretty interesting.
So you get the impression then that since they're avoiding the green ray energy, that they need other people's energy in order to move on. So they're living, they continue. I think they ask that as another question. Maybe it's in a Quo or Ra, where, you know, obviously there's a constant need for energy from people. They're sort of the energetic vampires on a large scale, right? Because they don't have access to the green ray energy. They're skipping it, right? Which is the advantage to the positive side, because they have that access, and it's and so is that your impression, that they're taking energy from other people because they don't have access to that energy?
Well, I don't know if they take energy per se, because the only energy they could, Ra says at one point that the negative entity can't create distortions in someone. They can only manipulate ones that are already present.
Right.
Which is why, you know, purifying yourself and becoming crystallized is the best weapon of defense. Have no distortions available for the negative entity. But I don't know if they take energy per se, but I do know that they, you know, Ra says that because of the way that they distort and block the lower three chakras, they're actually able to bring about contact with intelligent infinity through the lower three chakras alone. Which is what the positive does through opening the entire channel.
Right.
So when used in dedicated fashion, the negative entity accesses all the same powers of higher consciousness as the positive being does, which is really amazing to think about.
Right.
But then it just becomes a game of like, how do I protect this extremely precious negative polarization that I've worked so hard for? Because as you said, there's a few very notable advantages in the service to others path over the service to self path. One of them being the ease of polarization, that, like, for example, a service to others entity doesn't require any certain response from the other self in order for polarization to happen. So if I'm just here to give love and service freely with no expectation of return, then it doesn't actually matter if you accept or reject my love and service. As long as I've given it freely with no expectation, I'm still going to polarize.
Right.
Now, do I polarize a little more if you do accept it? Maybe. I don't actually know the answer to that, but it doesn't require a certain response from you. It just requires my own response to the moment of love. But the negative entity has to enslave and possess, which means that the entity being enslaved must willingly accept that enslavement and initiate themselves into a master-servant relationship for that polarization to happen. So they have to be masters in the art of manipulation, which, as you can imagine, is a whole lot more work than just freely giving love, right?
Of their own free will. They have to give up of their own free will, as it says in the law, which is which requires amazing levels of manipulation. They cannot create too large of a catalyst, because that catalyst will turn to the positive. It always has to be incredibly subtle, as I read this, as I try to understand this, right? So then you, I think I mentioned it to my text to you. So then, you know, what's it like on the other side? We get an idea of the negative. And then there's very few people that have crossed the 95% service to self threshold that have gone on to the fourth density, including Genghis Khan, who is a shipping clerk. Genghis Khan is a shipping clerk with the Crusaders, right? I think is what they said, right? So we have this.
Think about that, right?
Think about that. You got this vision. Genghis Khan, who, you know, was this killer, and we know about him in our history, is this dude in a shipping. Right?
Like that's the nature of the negative path, is it's always about a hierarchy and a pecking order, and you have to climb and claw and fight your way to the top, and everyone in your path is fighting their way to the top. So it's like a battle royale or a bracket system or something.
Right.
And
Game of Thrones all the way. You watch your back at all times, and everybody's
exactly,
you know, completely insane, right? So
imagine being Genghis Khan, who is the greatest warlord ever in human history, probably. And then your next lifetime, you're a shipping clerk at the bottom of the totem pole, taking orders from everyone else.
And he worked really hard to get there.
You worked real hard to get there. Yeah.
Right.
So
So
it's like a path of no reward almost.
right. It's at least it's explained in that. So the question I keep on coming up with, and I think it's sort of answered in the quo material post 2012, but pre 2012, it's all about 2012. They're talking about this. This is a cutoff date. This is when we move into the fourth density. In Carla's book, The Choice, she says, if you haven't made your choice, service to self or service to others, by December 21st, 2012, or whatever the exact date was, I think that was the date, then it's too late. So I'm a sleeping zombie in 2012. I'm in the illusion. I'm in the illusion, deep within the illusion. I've meditated and done those things, but I make my choice after 2012. So that means I have to wait 75,000 years. Is that what it means? Do I effed up because I didn't make my choice by 2012, or is it during my lifetime? What is your impression of this material in that regard?
Yeah. Well, first thing I'll say is that if that is true, which I'm not sure it is, that you missed an opportunity if you're not service to others by 2012, it wouldn't mean you have to do 75,000 years of third density again, necessarily. Right. It all depends on how fast your soul chooses to evolve. So like you carry your rate of vibration from lifetime to lifetime as you expand your consciousness and evolve. So the more evolved you become, the more likely you are to penetrate the veil and achieve enlightenment or realization and be eligible for fourth density. So like you could go to another third density planet, let's say, and pick up where you left off here, so to speak. It depends on the amount of karma that your soul is carrying. So it's different from person to person. But Ra uses that analogy of the staircase of light. And it's like every step you walk, you're getting closer to the fourth density stair. And, you just pick up where you left off from lifetime to lifetime. But what it means is that you can't continue your third density experience here, possibly, since it's technically a fourth density planet. But I know that there is a transition point between densities where it's kind of eligible for both, or hospitable for third and fourth density learning, as Ra would say. And I think, literally in a time sense, like fourth density is 30 million years. So like we're less than 10 years into fourth density. So like it literally just happened. Like the fingers have just snapped for fourth density. And I think that we're going to have a while here, maybe a few hundred years, probably, maybe longer, where third density souls can still incarnate here. But the vibration is going to be raising higher and higher, which means if you've still got a lot of third density karma and the vibrations are raising here, like you're not going to have as much opportunity to learn those karmic lessons as you would on a less evolved third density planet. So the soul kind of does need to go where it is the best match for it. Because it's like, imagine this, right? Let's say I murdered someone in my past life and I have to do a lot of forgiveness work and stuff. And I show up on a very, early fourth density planet, let's say 300 years from now, where everyone's pretty enlightened here. There's definitely really no murder that ever happens anymore. We're starting to share thoughts a little bit. Like, do I have much opportunity to learn that lesson anymore? Not really, right? I should probably go to a less evolved planet to have a better chance. Right. So all that to say, and I'll circle back to this as my final point. I don't know when Carla wrote that. And I would never say that she was wrong or misunderstood these concepts or something. I certainly don't have a firm grasp of them all, but all of my reading and understanding of the raw material would say otherwise, that it's not about the exact time when the planet itself shifts to fourth density. Like, January 1st, 12:01 a.m. You missed it. Sorry, man, you missed the cut. It's not quite that drastic. It's more like my lifetime experience on this planet as the shift has happened. I still have this whole lifetime before the incarnation ends to be eligible, right? Your eligibility ends when your incarnation ends. That's when, as Ra says, the source is looking at, okay, what stair did you just leave off on? Right. And I think if you've evolved into that fourth density understanding of oneness before your incarnation ends, then you would be eligible for fourth density. But Of course, that's just my opinion on the matter.
Right. That is kind of my opinion, that it's going to be within this lifetime. And so that's why a lot of people came to this planet, because we get to experience the transition from third to fourth, which is super, as Don Elkins explains, it's a huge acceleration. Because in the old days, when you were, in the inner parts of the galaxy, when they just had 9 archetypes, right? It took forever for people to move from third to fourth. It just took forever, because they would never learn the lessons, right? And once they separated the subconscious from the conscious mind, it was like, all the evil has been a huge, as Don Elkins explained, has been a huge help in pushing people into the next density. The way he explains it, right? That choice.
Yes.
So it makes sense to me. I get that.
Yeah. Do you know when Carla wrote that by chance?
I think it's like 2010. It's definitely pre-2012. Okay. It's the book, The Law of One, The Choice. And so, there is some Quo sessions in 2018, and then where they ask, about this, and they do say what you say. There's sort of 100-year period of time where there's, they're both densities, and you're going through a process of healing the planet, and
right.
As we talked about in our last. You can just look at nature, the way it works. It's slow. It takes its time. It doesn't have everything happening in one day or one moment that has to be decided, right? So here's a question I get from people that become interested in the Law of One. 65-year-old person. Hey, Brian, I didn't know about this. I've never really considered it, and I really want to be service to others. Is it too late? I've been service to self my whole life, and how can I ever? How can I ever get to 51%? I've been such a selfish bastard my whole life. Now I want to be, helping out others, but it's going to take me forever. I don't think I'll ever be able to. Is it really worth it? Should I just wait till my next life? Can we instantaneously move towards that service to self and really make a change quickly in this lifetime? If we suddenly make the choice, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah. Well, that's the beautiful aspect of love, right? Is that it's totally forgiving and unconditional, and it shines equally upon everyone. Right. So in a moment, in an instant, the heart can shift and have, as the Course in Miracles calls it, the miracle, the shift in perception from fear to love. And what Ross says, very clear, if you're 51% or more service to others oriented, you will be looked at as eligible for a 4th density body after this incarnation.
Right.
So, to simplify it for somebody, you could almost think of it like this. Look within yourself and ask yourself this question honestly. If I'm put through a simulator 100 different times of pick a scenario, I'm a little bit running late to something, to work or whatever, and opening the door, and some lady drops her groceries or whatever, and I'm running late. I have that moment of like, should I stop and help her at my own detriment, or should I just blaze on past? And if you stop to help her pick up the groceries 51 out of 100 times, you're 4th density eligible. So only you can look inside yourself and say, do I believe I'm at that point of open-hearted love? Do I see people as myself enough to where that would be my automatic response? And if the answer is no, I really don't think it takes very long to get there. I think it takes long to get there because people don't know that they're a soul on an evolutionary journey. They believe they're in this world of survival of the fittest. Look out for number one, protect yourself. Mm-hmm. Every man for himself. I mean, that's kind of what we're conditioned to believe in society. So from that perspective, it doesn't seem super beneficial to me to help somebody. But as soon as you know the game you're playing, all of a sudden the dynamics change dramatically. And I think within a few, months time, a few years time of just doing some real work on yourself, absolutely anyone can get to that place where they say, no, I choose love. I choose service. Mm-hmm. I'm going to work towards that direction. I think that it's the knowing the game you're playing that takes time, not so much the change.
Which is why they tried so hard to stop this information from coming out. They literally tried to kill these people that were doing this channeling. To stop this, because they knew as soon as it came out, enough people will just be aware of the game. And and let me ask you about this phenomenon to compare notes. When you openly said, I choose service to others, you started getting opportunities that were being presented to you where you could really be of service in a bigger way than you imagined, magically almost. And that as soon as you made that choice, a sort of external dynamic started coming to you in your external world where, wow, I have an opportunity to be of service way more than I imagined, right?
Yeah. Yeah, here's another one of the very notable advantages of the service to others path is that this idea of shared giving, that in love, like both people involved win, and in separation, both people involved lose. It's a lose-lose in the ego's world. And so when I give someone love and service, there's this immediate response of polarization in my energy body. The heart chakra, literally, you can feel it palpitating physically a lot of times when you give someone a warm smile and you see them light up, or you help somebody and they say, thank you. It's immediate. And it becomes addicting, right? You love this feeling of connection and oneness and love. And from that point on, the soul is going to be more eager to do that. So it really, the idea of shared giving, that the love I give you is immediately given back to me in my own polarization. It's very obvious that it becomes to my own best interest to continue being loving and giving service, because the happiness I deliver is always my own happiness, right?
Well, what I say this too, one of the advantages of the time we're living is that we can really be of service without ever leaving our house.
I know, right?
It's a wonderful thing. We can be of service just sitting in our office talking on camera like we are now. And we don't, some people are like, Brian, I just don't like people, very much. I don't want to go out. It's okay. You can still be of service. You don't even worry about that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we're pretty blessed in the times we live in. No doubt about it.
So using this as a background, I want to talk about the story of the Law of One, something I know that you're researching a little bit right now. And so this Don Elkins dies at the end, and that's what ends the whole thing. Clearly, you're reading along, and if you just open it up to some sections, some of the questions may not make sense. They're asking a lot of questions. When I spoke to Jim McCarty, they start getting concerned about Carla. She's getting sick. She gave up. As Jim explained, she would put out a ton of energy when she would do these channelings. And so then they started to become aware that there was a fifth density negative entity thought form that was attacking them, making her sick. And there's a point in time where they even say the entity was trying to force Carla into negative space, meaning that she would be stuck there for millions of years. This horrifying possibility that they would get her. She's a positive. She's the positive, but she would be stuck in negative space for. It implied like millions of years. Oh, and then Ra's like, oh, but it'd be all good for her. She'd have some.
I know.
Like
so density of him, right?
Not, right? She's gonna be
like
stuck
a couple million years is just like a sneeze.
But she'll have this great benefit. It'll be all good. Like, no, I'm sorry, I don't quite get that, right? It was this horrifying possibility, right? So you got the impression that Don Elkins realized that too, and that part of what happened afterwards, he was protecting her somehow. And I wanted to get your feeling. I've read some of the newspaper articles, and there's some Reddit reports where people that worked for the Law of One that were aware of what happened. Don Elkins commits suicide in his house. There's the police show up, a bunch of people surround him. He goes out back. Which is crazy. People have used that to undermine the Law of One, saying, oh yeah, this guy was crazy, had mental illness problems, killed himself. Why would you respect this material? So let's go to the core of that. Let's talk about what you know about it and how it relates to this material.
Yeah. I almost see it like a really great, murder mystery movie where the movie starts with this man in so much distress, and the police show up and he goes out and kills himself, and then the whole movie works backwards to find out what drove this man to this point. And so it's easy for someone on the outside who knows nothing about the Law of One or metaphysics at all to just say, well, he killed himself, the material must not be that good.
Right.
But it could also be because it is that good, and that's the important point. If that's what it is, then this should be something that everyone deserves to spend some time looking into, right? So I think what we need to look at here is how this fifth density negative entity was attacking this group and trying to, as Ra would say, eliminate this contact. Ultimately, it was successful in doing that with Dawn. But after 106 sessions were completed and basically the text had already been written, who knows how long they would have gone, I don't know. But enough of the material got out to fulfill the duty that Ra was intending in delivering it, right?
Right.
But Ra does say a few times in these conversations about the negative entity that it's looking to snuff out the light, because what does Ra say? He who shines the brightest light attracts the most attention. So it's like these negative entities are very serious in trying to prevent these kinds of up levelings in consciousness on our planet wherever they can find them. And of course, something like a Ra contact is extraordinarily rare.
Right.
But if that level of contact is happening, you better believe it's going to attract a lot of negative attention to try and stop that from happening, because the degree to which the negative being interferes with that service to others, they'll gain some polarity. So it's not only do they want our planet to be a service to self planet, first of all, because that would be an enormous amount of polarity for them if they could shift the whole planet. So you better believe they're going to work towards that goal because it's worthwhile. But secondly, they want also to have the chance to use a historical event like the Ra contact to also gain polarity if they can interrupt that. And so I think the fifth density entity tried it enough times with Carla, who would by far be the most prone of the three to that interference, right?
Right.
And it wasn't working because of Carla's resilience and protection that the group gave. But Ra explains how sixth density souls who wander here typically program some really heavy catalysts for themselves. And, they ask Ra, can you tell us what density the three of us are? And they say, I believe 1/5 and 2/6. And, looking at Dawn's level of understanding of metaphysics and his intellect and just the amazing mind he was, not hard for me to imagine he was probably sixth density.
Right.
And probably had programmed a lot of tough catalysts for himself.
Yeah, it turns out he
Dawn's
was sexually abused and used that as a catalyst to like avoid emotional interactions. And so he sort of he decided, I gotta open up myself to these emotions. And then the negative entity just grabbed onto that distortion in him. At least that's my understanding of it, right?
Yeah, if you look at the dynamics of the group, Carla was married to Dawn, right?
Right.
And from what I understand, there basically wasn't very much, if any, physical intimacy or desire for physical intimacy on Dawn's part. And so Dawn was like, hey, Jim, you can have her, basically. Like, I'm not
Right.
wired this way. And that could be from an incredible amount of trauma from his childhood past or something like that. And so, yeah, he was clearly wrestling with so many issues in his incarnation that I think it wasn't hard for a negative entity to sow thought forms and negative emotions and really manipulate those distortions to drive him to that point. And I think in another sense too, I don't know about you, Brian, but I've had this experience many, many times since reading the Ra material, where it's like my soul totally remembers that I am a higher density being who's used to enjoying much more freedom in the body, in the mind, in consciousness. And it's like, sort of like, thank God we don't remember, right? Because it's sort of like if you had to go live in the past 1,000 years ago, I mean, you'd probably commit suicide in a few months.
Right.
Like the world would be so horrible compared to what you're used to. No technology at all, no means of communication, horrible diseases, no medicine. We could go on and on. You'd be like, look, I'm good. I'm an eternal soul. Like, let me just get out of this shithole, right?
Right. You don't want to know
Dawn,
that there's no hunger and no poverty. It's like a perfect, totally different existence. We don't want to remember that. It can actually work against us, right?
It totally works against us.
Yeah.
It prevents us from taking advantage of the lessons here for us, which is why the soul comes here from a higher density, to take advantage of the really intense catalyst that third density offers. And I've had many moments where I have some kind of flash of insight or almost like memory of, I wouldn't say a past life necessarily, but just knowing like I am from elsewhere. I am used to enjoying all of these powers in consciousness that ETs demonstrate, telepathy, time travel and whatever. And now I'm in this heavy, dense chemical vehicle that has so many needs. It has to go to the bathroom every few hours, constantly
Right.
needs food. It has all these problems. It can't do pretty much anything in consciousness other than think. I have this ego that's constantly jabbering away. And there's this feeling of limitation of like, I want to escape this shithole I'm in. And that's the catalyst in and of itself, right? Can I meet this moment with love? Can I be okay with the fact that I'm from elsewhere and accept that my soul chose this lesson and make use of it? And that's a hard catalyst. And I think Don probably had a whole lot of that going for him as well.
Right.
So I don't blame him at all for, what he went through is exactly what his soul needed to experience. And to summarize it all, Carla even said that Don appeared to her in a dream, I think maybe more than once, and said to her, hey, all is well. Everything that happened needed to happen. Don't worry about me. I'm doing just fine. Love and light, all is well. And that's the moral of the story, is that in the end, all is always well.
So is your opinion perhaps going and trying to get a regression on your past lives might work against you? I do see that in some cases, like, it's wonder. I would love to know, and all this, and I get flashes of insight, but there's a part of me that says, that's not going to really help me right now. There's a reason I don't remember this, and I don't need to know, or perhaps it's helpful. What is your opinion using that as a background?
I think it depends on your own consciousness actually piercing the veil and having the experiential memory of your past lives. I think if somebody maybe tells you, oh, hey, I'm getting this download, you were on the Sirius galaxy or fifth density, whatever. You're like, whoa, how cool. I'm fifth density. Like I'm from Sirius. That probably wouldn't inspire the same amount of feeling trapped and feeling like you don't belong here as you actually for your own self in some kind of experience you have in meditation or whatever. Have you seen the movie Lucy with Scarlett Johansson?
Oh yeah. I love that one.
Yeah. So I don't know about you, but after I watched that movie, it triggered some kind of soul memory in me, because I was in this state of like total, almost like shock and silence, because it was as if I totally remembered I am from elsewhere and I'm stuck in this body with no abilities, like all the abilities that Scarlett Johansson's character has in that movie, manipulating her body through thought, teleporting, telepathy, mind reading. I was like, yeah, that's super normal. We all do that. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm trapped in this chemical vehicle that can't do anything. And it wasn't a sad feeling per se, but it did make me very quiet inside. I'm like, okay, I'm here. Let me make use of this, but this is not my native home type of thing.
Right. And there's a certain sort of sadness with that realization. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I was reading a Neville Goddard lecture the other day, and they're asking, what's the new world like? And he's like, I can't even begin. You're omnipresent. You create whatever you want instantaneously. Food does it. He was expressing, and I started like, oh yeah, I remember. There's like, I started to get that feeling. Oh, so yeah.
Ah, shit.
Oh man. So I'm trying to write a book about the new earth and using some of this stuff. So I want to get your opinions, because the new earth are just, tag words, and for a lot of people, used in the Bible, the new earth and new heaven. And really when Ra's talking about the fourth density, that's the closest I can understand. So do you think the fourth density planet exists at the same time as the third density, or it's going to be on the same physical planet, but hundreds of years from now, we will be evolved beings in different bodies? Or is, as Dolores Cannon discusses, this is an actual sort of planet that is starting to come into existence now, and our thoughts and path move us towards this new earth. What is your impression of this thinking? You see it a lot on YouTube and other books, this description of this other planet, this green ray planet that is existing in the same place as ours now that we can't see. And then what is your impression of it?
Yeah, such an interesting topic, because I'm very familiar with Dolores's material as well, and I love comparing Law of One and Dolores Cannon's understandings of these ideas. I think it has to do with the whole space-time and time-space idea that Ra touches on.
Right.
And here we are in the time-space realm, which to me means that time is kind of the prime mover, or the you could think of it as like the limiting factor. Like we're down to time here,
Right.
But you know, in the other side, space is more of the limiting factor, and time is not. Meaning that all realms, all worlds, all times are available simultaneously. And Ra talks about this, right? The analogy of like a planet where Tokyo's down here, New York's up there, Budapest, you name it. And there's people moving around the planet all at the same time, but in different locations. It's like that's how space-time is for those beings, where they can visit any time in our world's history by traveling the space to get there. So it's almost as if the fourth density planet, which all versions of the planet exist simultaneously in that realm, it's as if those are being downloaded into the time-space realm that we experience here as time moves forward. Because time and space are really one phenomenon, almost like a coin. You flip it and you've got the other side of the coin you're experiencing.
Right.
So I think they're both true in that sense, but I understand it as, yes, it is this actual planet that is evolving by the photon increasing its rate of vibration, which makes more evolutionary capacity available. And we develop these abilities like telepathy, a more of a chemical / light body, and it progresses in that fashion. But it's also true to say that that world exists in the space-time realm, and we are moving towards it, or it's coming into the time-space realm, if that makes sense.
I read an interaction the other day where Gary was asking Quo about, and I finally understood the distinction between time, space, space-time. Space-time, you don't have to go anywhere. All of it is accessible to you. And time, space, the thing that's limiting you is time, moving from one place to another.
It takes time to travel distance.
Right. I didn't quite get that. So space-time, all of space is available to you, but so you wonder if space moves like time in the space-time, right?
Yeah.
If
you can imagine what the opposite type of experience would be to this, it would be that.
Right. Space is actually time, but it's, you know, who could go right. So there's so much. I want to take a little bit of time. We've been talking about Law 1 this whole time. One of the best things on your channel is the stuff about the mind and the ego. And I've learned so much from you. And so there's a lot of different interpretations of the ego. Your discussion of the ego is very important, and understanding of your concept of the ego will help you get a better clarification of enlightenment and your spiritual process. You know, is the ego all bad? Is my first question. Or is it there to help you? Because you could get the impression with some of your videos that the ego is all bad, but I don't think that you're quite saying that. An understanding of what the ego is and how it works makes that question unimportant. So help me to clarify your understanding of the ego. Yeah,
excellent question. All spiritual truths are paradoxes. And so, you know what I mean? So like the linear analytical mind is always in a rush to form an opinion or conclusion about something. And that's why it always misses the truth that's there in front of it. So the paradox with ego is that it is the cause of all human suffering. So the mind goes, well, then it's bad. No, it's not. Everything is serving a divine purpose. So the ego was created by source intelligence, by the logos, literally, to do exactly what it's doing, which is to aid in the evolution of consciousness. So the best way to look at this would be through the polarities, positive and negative. Because of the polarities, the universe exists, right? If there wasn't polarity, we have no manifestation. And so the positive is the outgoing, creating force, and the negative is like that which drives it, like pushes it from behind, because they're always repelling one another. So it's like our suffering motivates us to go forward in evolution because we want to escape suffering. And Ra also talks about this in the Law of One, about what these worlds were like in previous, like prior to the veil logos experiments, where there wasn't a veil of forgetting and they knew everything. Ra said they were sort of like children in school who had no punishment or reward for doing homework. So they just played around all the time. They said it was just this perpetual third density state. But once they covered the veil, so you can't remember anything and you're just stuck in this world, well, now the mechanics of survival and competition were evolved, and which is what the ego does. It's survival of the fittest, right? Look out for number one. And that's what motivates the soul to have to make a quicker decision of which path do I want? Do I want to keep evolving my ego and be service to self? Or do I want to transcend my ego and be service to others? So in that sense, in a very real sense, the ego is the supreme guru. It is that which is delivering us higher knowledge by being pure ignorance, right? Ego is the belief in separation. But you only know a thing by its opposite. You only know something by the contrast of the opposite. So in that very real sense, ignorance is knowledge, because ignorance leads you to knowledge, right? Working through ignorance, working through illusion helps you to see truth. So ego is teaching the soul all the lessons it needs of love and understanding by being the opposite of that. So is the ego bad? My experience of the ego is that it's an incredibly divine, intelligent creation, and it's doing a masterful job at its function, which the source created it for. But that being said, it is helpful to know, as I talk about on my videos, the entire reason you suffer and every reason you've ever suffered in your entire life is because of your ego. So if you want to transcend suffering, that means you have to transcend your ego.
Well, it takes a long time to understand that. The ego is biased towards service to self 100%.
Yes.
So
100%.
Overcoming the service to self bias is so hard because the ego is always there. It never goes away. So, even when you're service to others, you still got to deal with the ego. It's like that really ugly picture that you put up somebody else put up in your room, and you can't take it down. It's just, you have to acknowledge that it's there and just kind of, right?
Yeah, very much so.
Or that bad song on the radio, and, you don't have any way of changing it. You just kind of have to block it out or be aware of the song, right?
Yes. And enough time of listening to the song without judging it is actually what allows the song to stop playing. So it's like the ego begins to die when you no longer have use for it, when you no longer react to it, when it doesn't trigger you anymore, when you can understand what it is. It's not bad, it's not evil, it's not wrong. It's just a faculty in the human brain that evolution has put in place to help us survive. Like it got us through second density and into third density. Without ego, there's no technology, there's no social hierarchy, there's no government, no economics. So it's done so many good things for us, but everything in evolution serves a purpose. And when the monkey's tail is no longer useful, evolution discards it, right? So it doesn't mean it's wrong or invalid just because we've outlived its usefulness, right?
Right.
It means it served a purpose to carry us from one place to another, but it's no longer needed. And this is a big misconception I'll hear very often about ego is like, well, the ego is great because without it, we wouldn't survive. We would just walk into traffic. We would, feed each other, but never feed ourselves and stuff like that. And that's profoundly not the case.
Mm-hmm.
The ego is what taught us those things in evolutionary past. But as consciousness evolves and understands what it is, how to operate in time, space, it's like it can retain all the lessons it learned from ego without needing the ego anymore.
Right.
Meaning the enlightened mind still looks at a dark alleyway and knows it's probably dangerous to walk down there. I'll walk down the illuminated alleyway instead. Like intelligence is awareness. Awareness is intelligence. The ego is not intelligent. The ego is just the act of being identified. Intelligence and awareness is what's making decisions.
So if you're service to self and you really want to change the polarity, you become a spiritual advisor and say the ego is great. You want to embrace the ego. The ego is a wonderful thing, right? You see this. I sometimes see people and like, I kind of see where the overlying influence that they're getting some of their material from, this idea of embracing the ego. Every once in a while, I notice that. But
yes.
So
I hear a lot of people say, you need to have it's not about getting rid of your ego, but having a healthy ego.
Right.
Like if that isn't the ego saying that, I don't know what is. Like that's exactly what ego wants you to think.
Exactly.
There's no such thing as a healthy ego. The ego doesn't have second option. It's just service to self, and that's all it will ever be. So you can learn from the ego, as we've said, and take those lessons with you. But the ego is simply, and this is my definition for ego, it is the mental activity of identifying with things,
Right.
identifying with objects, with ideas, with concepts. I am this body. I am this person. I did that. I thought that. I felt that. When in actuality, there is no division between, there is no separate self that stands outside of the causal structure of the universe and makes its own decisions. That's the ego. It's the belief in personal doership. There's just the one life living everything. And we see this very easily when we look out the window, when we're driving down the street or something. We see all these cars and people hustling and bustling around and birds flying and clouds moving. And we go, wow, look at outside of me. The whole universe is just happening. But in here, there's a personal independent doer. And
Right.
that's ego. It's a mistake. It's an error in perception. There is
Right.
no separate self making its own decisions. Every single urge I feel, every single decision I make is actually life's decision happening through me.
Right.
And the more we see that, the more we surrender to that life, that one will, the will of God, and we just let it live us. And as soon as we surrender to it, an amazingly beautiful thing happens where ego hears the message of non-doership, that there's no independent doer, and it goes, well, what a terrible universe to live in, that I'm just a puppet on a string being played by the universe, right? And it's like, no, you missed the point. There is no separate self that gets puppeteered. There's just the one life, and you are that. And so when you surrender to the one life and say, there's no separate self, the Aaron person character doesn't exist. It's just something that life is doing. It's a way that life, the creator, is expressing itself. So let me know myself as the creator, as Ra would say. Once you make that shift in your perception of self, an amazing thing begins to happen where you actually feel experientially that you are life.
Yes.
That you are the universe, and you live in that mode. And so when you see another person, any experience you have, it's just you and you and you everywhere you look. And increasingly the heart is just open with love and understanding and compassion for everything, because you're not thinking about it, analyzing it intellectually. Well, that person's me, so I should really forgive them because that would eliminate karma. You just experience yourself in another body and you go, I forgive you. It's me making that decision.
Right.
How could I not have compassion? And it's effortless.
So I've always wanted we're almost out of time. So I've always wanted to ask you about this because we talked a little bit about it in our first interview, because I had mentioned Neville Goddard. I find it fascinating because you have that, the Christian background. So you have some awareness of some of these biblical, if you read Neville Goddard later on in his life, he started talking about the promise and claimed that he had this experience where he realized, like you said, that everybody is me pushed out. I see myself in everybody. But then he starts going into these experiences where he hears the wind that's talked about when Jesus is born. And then he awakens holding a baby that is his future body that is born while he's now. And then he has these experiences where God comes down and it's pure love and he embraces love. He has an experience where he's on his bed and he is all light at the same time in the whole universe. And he says everybody will have this experience at some point in time where they realize they are God or the one, right? And so so a lot of people start claiming they had these same visions, that it happens over a specific number of days, that 1,200 whatever number of days, and they have these experiences where they realize that they are Christ waking within their body, moving to another density, and their body is being born. And I'm just like, this feels like it fits. But then it's a little bit of crazy in there, a lot of people, who knows, but I wanted to get your impression if you ever been exposed to that material and what you thought of it.
Yeah, no, I love reading Neville Goddard because he was just such a radical for his time to be talking about this stuff. In some ways it's still radical to talk about it and you still get flack for it. And so I see him as such a pioneer in this field in so many ways. And of course, law of attraction and other things he talked about. But yes, it's the experience that it's always going to sound crazy to the egoic mind because that mind is trapped in duality. I really am a body. I am this meat suit, even though I don't know how it does anything at all, but I am it and it is me. And so all of its limitations are my limitations, and that's normal. And everyone lives in that mode. So when you escape from that matrix and you realize all there is consciousness, and there's not like many kinds of consciousness. There's just consciousness, right? Awakeness, awareness. You realize, well, then I'm everything. If there's just consciousness, I am what consciousness is doing. Like when you become lucid in a dream, it's the exact same experience. The whole dream is me. So you look up at the moon and you're just struck with wonder and amazement at it, wondrous admiration, going, wow, I am expressing as the moon. Like it's so beautiful. It's an aspect of me. Right. And that's what we call Christ consciousness, the experience of I and God are one. And this is what Neville talked about and really was the foundation on his whole law of attraction philosophy. Was it really creation and manifestation begins with knowing I am pure light, which means I am creative. I am the creator. I am light creating light. And that's what manifestation essentially is. Now, he does claim that, you only experience childhood once, and that that you go back into bodies thinking that you've had a childhood, and there's a whole other sort of existence where you re-experience these lessons that God gives you until you've gone through all of these. So it's kind of a weird way of reincarnation. I don't know, but well, I've thought about that a number of times, actually. Right. When you really tune into your direct, immediate experience, you start getting some glimpses of what true simultaneity means. And no beginning is the highest truth, as the Buddha said in the Diamond Sutra. And I'll ask myself questions like this, where I go, does it feel more accurate to me to say that I actually lived that whole lifetime of this Aaron person and his childhood and stuff? Or is this moment the first moment I'm in this body, and I just have the memories of the body from its past? Yes, thank you. It's like that actually feels more accurate. It does. We think that we had this whole past, but we literally, you and I could have just started right today. We never really woke up this morning, and all that other stuff is just memory, and it feels right to me. I've had several. You get the idea of people say they're walk-ins. Who knows? But still the idea that our memory is not us. That we think that we wake up in the morning, we think that I've lived this whole life and all that stuff, but that's just a story that's in my mind, a memory. And it would be so easy if you just jumped into a body and you woke up with all those memories. How do you really know it all happened? Yes. How do you really know? The present moment is all that there is. It's all that exists. Right. Thank you, Aaron. Magical. Thank you so much for joining me. And I could probably talk to you for another couple of hours, but we'll leave it at that, so we have more to talk about next time. But good luck in your future endeavors. I know you have many. I'm always rooting for you. Please subscribe to Aaron Abke's channel, and anything that he does is top notch. Whatever he does, whenever you see his name, just click on it. Just like right, bam, there's Aaron. You got to click on it. That's probably the best advice I can give to anybody that is going through a spiritual process. Start with Aaron, because Aaron's been there, and Aaron truly cares. And thank you so much for helping me out, and so many other people for introducing me to the Law of One. If there was no Aaron Abke, there's no me talking about Law of One on my channel, because Aaron is the one that inspired me to look into this. And thank you, because it's definitely changed my life. And I know that you've changed thousands of people's lives. So thank you so much. You have been a great service to me. Thank you, Aaron. It means a lot. All right. We're all connected, huh? We're all connected. So I will talk to you soon. I'll keep an eye out. Thank you so much. Thank you, my brother. Always a pleasure. Well, welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm just really excited today because this is the first day that my book
is released. This is it. The reality revolution. Worked on this for a very long time. So many of the things that I discovered along the way, and I was excited to share it with everybody. Tell you a little bit about it. I'm like everybody else. I'm interacting in the world and starting to realize that my thoughts created reality. As I did this, I started to see some major shifts in my reality. I started to explore the idea of maneuvering through parallel realities. I'm your host, Brian Scott.
We return you now to your local announcers.